Very good. Thanks. I'll start over again. Paul Dean, good morning. It's Friday, July 9th. This is our Smart Market call. We hold this call every Friday morning at 10 a.m. We talk about materials exchange systems, resources, tips, and tricks. We do a market update on mills and supply. We've got great industry guests. And the whole general theme of the Smart Market, of course, is thought leadership. And we've got a special two-part show here for you today, today on July 9th and next week on the 16th, talking about the component manufacturing marketplace. We've got some great guests here on today. We've got Sean Shields, who's the Director of Communications for the SBCA, and we've got Chris Tatge from Dynamic Construction Partners, who's also the President and Chairman of the National Framers Council. So they're going to give us some unique perspectives on not only the industry, but some new emerging niches within the industry. And also, we hope to hear a little bit about the SBCA itself as an entity, some of the committee structures, and what its mission statement is in terms of advocacy for its members. So Chris and Sean will be great spokespersons for that organization as well. So this week in Materials Exchange, we'll continue to talk about the market movement, of course. Ashley will be talking about the huge drop in prices that we've seen, and then the bounce, and then where's it going after the bounce. We're going to talk about thought leadership in terms of the trade, and how even some of the terms of the trade these days are emerging and changing due to our new digital platform. We're going to talk about a new product category, and then we're going to get into component manufacturing. So we've got a lot to cover here. So I'm going to just jump right into it. In terms of our own product listings, we just added a new product listing to the exchange called planar millouts. You have got to log in and log out to see it. Planar millouts. Millouts are essentially a lower grade kind of a material, synonymous with number 3 or 4. It's not yet grade stamped, and many of those in the know actually trade this in large quantities. So we had a request from one of our customers to add PMOs to the exchange, and we're doing so. And in the lower left-hand corner, I just wanted to bring your attention to the fact that, as we build out the exchange, our core products and the core mission of the exchange, of course, are dimension lumber, studs, and panels. These are commodity products that are traded in large volumes. And that is the general mission of the exchange. But as time has gone by, we're getting lots of different requests for lots of different product categories. Panels, pallets, industrial, all sorts of different things are being asked of us to add these things to the exchange. And of course, all sorts of specialty and niche products. These kinds of products are best fit for the exchange if they've got standardization in their SKUs. That's really the big thing. The more complex and the more that they are, the less they are good candidates for the exchange. The more commodity-based and more consistent they are in terms of SKUs, those are the kind of things that we're looking to add to the exchange. And just as a reminder, you've got to log out of your existing level and then refresh and log back in to see these kinds of things. So I want to talk a little bit this morning about thought leadership. I'm going to limit it to the supply chain itself right now. I did a quick brain dump just this morning. Ashley and I were talking about the kinds of various people in the supply chain, starting with the mills and the manufacturers, and then going all the way down to the builders. As you can see, there's all sorts of different designation of people that are involved in the supply chain. They are remanufacturers or component manufacturers like our guests today. You've got various variations of distributors, 1 and 2 steps, wholesalers, retailers, assemblers. You've got turnkey framers, which is now a subcategory of component manufacturing. You've got all the different variations of builders. So you've got all of these different people along the way that take ownership of lumber. And along the way, as far as the exchange is concerned, we're starting to refer to them really just as lumber buyers or lumber sellers. As far as we're concerned, in a digital marketplace, in an open marketplace, you're really on one side of the transaction or the other. So lumber buyers and lumber sellers is something that is, we've kind of watered it down to changing the way we think in the marketplace. And I'll explain that here a little bit. The platform brings to the market all sorts of new capabilities, right? We've got digital technology. It allows you to see real-time data that fluctuates and moves all throughout the day. It provides transparency, speed, and access. So these are open markets. Buyers can buy from any of the sellers on the platform, and sellers can sell to any of the buyers on the platform. This is a lot different than your traditional linear supply chain. There are no credit lines. You actually pay with order. As long as you're working out of your own working capital or your own bank lines of credit, you can trade on the exchange. Everything is freight adjusted to handle multiple destinations. So if you're buying from multiple locations, you can see landed costs to those various different locations. And then of course, everything is available in multiple units of measure. And that will be a future feature of the exchange. So it's really interesting. You've got these new capabilities that are exposing themselves to all these different parts of the supply chain. And I just wanted to expand a little bit. And this goes back to some of the success we had about a month ago when some retailers were selling OSB back up the channel. And it enabled me to think a little bit differently about two-step distribution. You know, two-step distribution, of course, follows the traditional supply chain. You've got manufacturing to the wholesale distribution level, to the retailer, typically to the end user. Material just kind of flows downhill, if you would, and profit is made at each ownership change. I mean, at all these different inventory values that occur, profits are made, and there are these different stops along the way where lumber will actually reside for different periods of time. And a big part of the value proposition, of course, when you start getting into distribution, are mixed loads, maybe credit lines, and that value proposition is still there. But a big part that's inherent in the value proposition of our supply chain is access. And so builders typically can't buy from the mills. You've got to go through your typical traditional supply chain, go to the person or the entity that's just above you in the supply chain, and you're limited by that access. These are one-way transactions only. As I say, that material flows downhill. And the end user really is the one that is always stuck with, if you would, the task of managing inventory in price volatile markets. That's where the heavy lifting really occurs. As a counter to that, a coin that we've been kicking around a little bit in the exchange is no longer two-step distribution, but more two-way distribution. And so what happens here is the end users actually have the opportunity to buy direct. If they've got working capital, they've got cash, they can buy in full truckload or rail car quantities. They can actually buy on the exchange. That opens up a whole new plethora of options where it's no longer a linear supply chain. It's more of a supply web, to coin Mike Wisniewski's term. The value propositions are really self-defined. If you're going to be someone that resells in this marketplace, you've got to have a value proposition that supports it. It's got to be because of a mixed truck quantity or maybe credit line reasons. But if you don't have that value proposition, you can buy anywhere in this supply web that you see fit. Again, these transactions now flow two ways, and they flow sideways. So really that end user that has to manage his inventory now has some inventory relief opportunities because they can actually sell over inventoried items and they can sell it for a profit. So that changes the way people have been thinking. And some of this was expected. Some of this was a little bit unexpected as we rolled out the exchange. And, you know, like any good open market, it just kind of finds its own water level. So again, when we talk about thought leadership in terms of the trade, I'm going to redefine today two-way distribution. We'll be using that term as we move forward, lumber buyers and sellers, to keep it really simple. And then we're going to start talking about other terms of the trade that are emerging. What's an MX certified reload? Well, you'll learn about in the future. We'll talk about what this two-way trading enables in terms of building out certified reloads. We'll talk about volume and tiered pricing. The traditional reduced pricing tiers based on the volume commitments that are required. Now buyers can actually submit tiered offers. They can put different level tiered offers into the marketplace. And when the market is moving, they can hit those offers or hit those buying opportunities at different price levels. What does that mean? We'll explain that more in future issues of the Smart Market call. So I'll get off that soapbox. It was kind of fun. I was doing a little brainstorming this morning, and that's just a brain dump. I'd like to just reintroduce or reaffirm some of the other items that we do to bring information to the marketplace. Our LinkedIn channel, of course, our This Week in Lumber series that Ashley does every Wednesday with Greg and Matt, every Thursday with Matt Lehman. These are tremendous information sources for you. And then don't forget that we do training every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday for people that are just joining the platform or maybe need a refresher. So with that, I am going to pause. I'm going to turn it over to Ashley to talk a little bit about the market.
Hey, Paul, how are you? Thanks. Great segue. It was a good chat walking down the sidewalk this morning on the way in with you. You got to love all this technology, the ability to contact any people anywhere real time, right? So let's talk a little bit about the market. The one resounding theme that I keep seeing is everybody says we're going to bounce because business is good, because people need to buy, because there's forest fires, because we just have to go up. So people have been calling a bounce from 1,500 down to 700 on some items, right? I don't know when it's going to bounce. I have no idea. I'm not smart enough to know that, but it will eventually, because every day you go lower, that means you're closer to a bottom. In theory, there's a thing in the industry, you can only go to zero, right? But when the way up, you can go infinitely to any number. So I will say we are closer today to a bottom than we probably were yesterday, but that's about all I know. The one thing I do see is the item that hadn't fallen off yet, panels in OSB. And here's what I see on that, and you can make your own determination on it. OSB over the last 2 months on the exchange has had retailers and users starting to list extra product to sell. And that's a phenomenon I would have never seen sitting in any other location ever where I worked at before. What that tells me is people have excess in the chain. It seeks its own level. Some people needed it at first at certain places and it shipped, if you were listening to us over the last few weeks, sometimes 1,800 miles away to people. Well, all of a sudden that slowed down a little bit, and now the market is stuck at kind of 1,300 on 7/16 everywhere. So what that tells me is it's having a really hard time getting a reported price because there's only a few producers. But it also lets me know that it's just sitting there waiting for something to happen. I'm not sure what's going to happen, but today, again, we have a lot of people on the platform listing to sell OSB, not a lot of bids. So this is information that you get by being on here, which is good. So now one thing we're seeing is a lot of people have interest in buying some stuff and everybody's chasing the market down. If you listen to our calls on Wednesday and Thursday, one of the things we talk about is having a game plan. If you have profit in it, and you're comfortable with that profit and you're buying what you need to buy, it probably isn't a bad idea to have a game plan buying. Picking bottoms and tops is kind of a fool's errand and it's tough to do. So my advice is do what you can to have an idea and a game plan all the time of what you want to be buying. And one of the cool things on the platform this week, we had a large job site person that saved a lot of money using our platform because they had traditionally gone through, they didn't know they could buy from other people. And they had some people they were using, and without any effort, we saved them a lot of money by them just being able to buy on here. So we know that there's opportunity out there with the way people are currently doing it and the way they can do it on Materials Exchange. The one interesting, resounding thing that keeps coming up, a lot of these people aren't used to the way the industry trades in dollars per 1,000 square feet or board feet. They trade per piece, but yet they still buy tens of millions of dollars of inventory every year. And a lot of times they're just I should say, giving somebody else with the knowledge of that knows how to trade in dollars per thousand and dollars per thousand square feet. Sometimes I think they just don't want to let people know they don't know, so they go out and give this to people to facilitate these trades and help be a interpreter of that. I know Paul's mentioned this in the past. One of the things we are going to start showing is dollars per thousand square feet, and per piece price eventually here. That will help educate, mitigate that confusion and help people buy more. So sorry, got off on a little soapbox there, Paul, but we're seeing some great things happen on here. It's Friday. Maybe lumber will go up or down today on a CME level, but we never know. But overall, the trend is still down, and we'll see if that changes next week. Back to you.
All right, cool, Ash. I appreciate that. Always great perspective. It's my pleasure this morning to introduce Sean Shields and Chris Tatge. I'm going to let Mike introduce these guys, but we have a really unique opportunity here this morning. Sean has a deep background in the industry. He is now the Director of Communications for the SBCA. He's got a great perspective on the component manufacturing side of the house. And so we're going to mine him for all sorts of great perspective. And then Chris he's actually joined the exchange here. I don't know, I think it was back in October. I looked it up, Chris. And he represents kind of a subset, if you would, of the framing community and chairs the National Framers Council. And his needs are very unique and very different than the traditional component manufacturer. So we're going to dive into that here a little bit this morning. Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you to take it from here.
Thank you very much, Paul. So I want to highlight why these two gentlemen are on this call with this group. There's a problem in the United States. We do not have enough housing. This problem is a big factor. One of the accentuating factors is that we don't really have enough labor to build these houses. So there's a lot of really smart people trying to come up with ingenuitive ways to build more, faster, better units. One of the major focuses is in offsite construction or componentized, the non-traditional, then the stick-built way. And this is what the SBCA and definitely the National Framers Council is all about. As a group, they get together and they try to figure out a better way to provide what the nation needs, what our society needs, which is a low cost, actually available housing unit. So I think as we listen to what they're talking about, we should probably keep that in the back of our minds of what is the real goal here, and it is to create more housing units. So with that, I'm gonna turn things over and really let Sean take the ball here and run with it and kind of tell us what's going on, Sean. What's happening with SBCA?
I wish I knew what was going on in the market, but I appreciate the introduction, Mike and Paul, and for the invitation to be on here today. Really, I want to get out of Chris's way as quickly as I can, because I think Chris has a really compelling story to share with all of you. But I think, Mike, you hit on the most important thing. Everybody's looking for the lowest cost solution for providing housing units in the U.S. today. I mean, you can't talk about the lack of housing without talking about where affordability is going, and those two are not good. Neither of them are going in a good direction. So there really is an openness by those who traditionally build to find any and all solutions that will allow them to do this more efficiently. And I think that's a great segue, honestly, to what Chris is doing. This concept of the turnkey framer, where traditionally, there's these silos in the construction supply chain. You got the material providers, you have maybe the manufacturers, the prefabricators, and then they would hand their product off to a framing contractor to install that product. And maybe they had a direct relationship for a while. Sometimes they had a two-step process where they were selling through an LBM, and so they may never have even interfaced with the installer of their product other than to drop those framing products off at the job site. But what Chris represents, and it's a growing trend, is the entity that does both of those things. They interface with the component manufacturer, and they supply not only the framing expertise and the labor in the field, but they also provide the materials, and that changes that dynamic considerably. So Chris, I'm going to turn it over to you right away and then fill in as we go. But can you talk a little bit about where you started and why you moved into turnkey framing and what that is?
I've been a framer for 23 years now. Started out labor only, swinging hammer on single family tract homes when I was a young man. Worked labor only for years and years, and really got good at it. One of my major hangups was pre-construction. I was always trying to get involved with pre-construction planning. I wanted to know what my panels would look like, what order my floor trusses were coming out in. Am I getting, what details are you guys using? And I want to be involved with that process, right? I couldn't get a seat at the table. Why not? In my market, component manufacturers sell to lumber yards who sell to general contractors, and then I bring in the labor afterwards. So why don't they want me at the table? They don't want me because I'm going to add cost. I'm going to add cost to them. I want my floor trusses sequenced out in order. I want to decide what the tally looks like for the stuff coming out on my job site. I want walls shipped in a certain order. I want control because I can streamline the labor on my site. Those guys don't want me at the table because it's all about the bottom line. They want to save a few bucks on the front end and have the best numbers moving forward and get the job. And then I show up and I want all these things that are going to add cost. So, a few years back, started getting involved in the National Framers Council. Got to meet guys like George Hull, Kenny Shiflett, Scott Stevens, very successful turnkey framing contractors from across the country. And I learned, you know what, I can take control. I can be the guy writing out the check to the CM. I can be the guy putting together the entire package. And I can tailor what I need to do to my labor in the field. What kind of advantages does that give me? My cost, it lowers my cost of labor. I know when and where my material is coming from. And all of it sort of comes back, but at its core is a focus on what happens when things get on site, right? Everything I'm doing is tailored to make that process smooth. I've had a lot of success because I've owned the package. I can guarantee my schedules because I control all the factors. It's a little harder to control things right now when you're looking for EWPs, but being able to, but basically it comes down to, I've been able to put out a package and make sure that things are streamlined and go well out on site. And that's really what it comes down to, right? Whatever you're doing on off-site construction, the focus is how does it go once it gets out there, right? And so turnkey framing really lends itself to success when you're out in the field. Eventually, these products have to get out there, and eventually they have to be installed on site. What does that process look like? I always like to sort of differentiate. There's a very big difference, in my opinion, between the turnkey framing contractor and sort of an installed sales division for somebody who's looking just to supply material and labor package. The framer's always going to look at things the way a framer's always seen it, right? I spend the money up front to make sure things go well on site. installed sales, you don't necessarily get that. You don't have framers looking at what's going to make this flow better for the labor. It's very much labor focused. I want to serve my installers and make sure that they're successful, and everything I do is sort of geared towards that.
Chris, I mean, what I'm hearing you say, what you're getting after is that, again, this is all about driving efficiency. I mean, at the end of the day, the only thing everybody should care about is, are we building buildings? Are they getting put together as efficiently as possible? Are people able to get onto that job site, get the job done, and move on to the next project as quickly and as efficiently as possible? Mm-hmm. Certainly with the material market where it's been, whether it's lumber or steel or engineered wood products over the last 6 months, I think that's driven home the fact to many in the supply chain that material costs matter. Material supply really matters. I mean, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems that that's always been an afterthought, particularly for the offsite fabricators. I mean, for component manufacturers, lumber is 40% of the cost of their goods. And yet, the cost of lumber, because of how low it's been for so long, that's an afterthought. They worry about logistics and they worry about design. Well, now they're very much focused on controlling waste, controlling cost, controlling when they buy, being as efficient as possible. And I would imagine for you, that's also something that you feel acutely right now, right?
Absolutely. A year ago, a year and a half ago, I'm spending 3 hours a week focused on lumber and buying lumber and this, that, and the other. Very much an afterthought. You can plug numbers in and you need to move a little bit. One thing we started doing this year is we're taking all of our floor sheeting scraps, our 3/4, hauling it back to our shop and reprocessing it and turning it into something that's usable, right? And I can take a dumpster full of 3/4 inch and make it worth $1,200 per thousand instead
the
of
Frankenstein of sheathing.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's very much so been at the forefront.
Chris, I got a quick question. So prior to doing the turnkey thing, you said you wanted a seat at the table. You felt they wouldn't let you on the table. You added cost. It was going to cost someone money, right? Now you're at the table. Someone must be saving money if you're at the table. So like Sean said, it's a more efficient process. Everybody wants to save a buck. Why is your way better for the entire process?
That's a good question. There's a few reasons. Because I own it and I have control, my cost of labor is significantly lower than a labor-only framing contractor who's sort of going into a crapshoot. You don't know if you don't always know if you're dealing with a lumber yard who's interested in serving you, who's going to get a quick turnaround on the stuff that you need. You don't know if you're jumping in bed with a component manufacturer who's not going to sequence things the way you want. So who's saving the money? In a perfect world, everybody can save using the turnkey framing model. The component manufacturer that I partner with, they know what I like, they know how I like it sent out. They're reaping the benefits of a consistent system. They know what I want every time. They're able to streamline their process. I know what I'm getting every time. And the general contractor is also going to see some of that savings. Of course, I try to bid up to the underside of the market, and I add value on my schedule guarantees. But when you create efficiencies all the way up and down, everybody should be able to win, especially when you're competing against people who are not concerned about those things. I'm a big believer in the turnkey thing. you see, what do other people call it? Other people call it vertical integration, right? You sort of see these entities coming up and growing and being very successful. You look sort of at like what Buddy Rainey did down in Florida, or what Integra is doing right now. This is the way things are moving. People are, and it's not, it's nice and it's ideal. And there's you think about the McKinsey report and how much innovation space that we still have. The idea of turnkey framing contracting is vertical integration. And because of the efficiencies it creates, people are going to have to move towards that model, and not necessarily exactly what I do, but they're not going to be able to just be out for themselves, because the inefficiencies are expensive. That costs money. People bid up when they don't know what to expect. And guys like me are going to pass those guys by, because there's savings to be had. There's benefits all over the place.
Follow-on question. Sorry that I'm hijacking you, Sean. Now, you
Stop it.
obviously, I'll tell everybody, you do multifamily almost
Yes.
exclusively, right?
Yep, that's correct.
What's your vision as far as moving a little bit outside of the multifamily? Like this makes sense real easily, and it's been proven, obviously, for multifamily type construction. But what about the single family, and how do you envision that that playing itself out?
There's a lot of good examples of that. Again, I'll go back to Florida Innovative Construction Group. Pulte just bought them last year. They were very much single family and multifamily, but they showed that you can own the process and be very successful. Not only did they take hold of the material side, they grabbed up the component manufacturing, the truss manufacturing, and they owned the engineering. They brought in their own engineering. And I see that as sort of, the professional framing contractor over the last, you can go back to the 1980s when George Hull started buying his own material, but over the last 10 years has really started owning the process as they understand more and more of the process. Just me as an example, the things I've learned from the access to information I get on your platform has been tremendously valuable. And as I continue to learn more and more, I just switched over to, talking about board feet per thousand instead of by the piece. As I continue to learn more, I'm going to want to continue to own more of the process. But vertical integration, turnkey framing absolutely can lend itself to the single family world really well.
I got a curveball to throw at you real quick.
Yeah.
What about Katera? They seem to have burned in a blaze of glory trying to do the vertical integration.
Well,
there's obviously pitfalls along the way. What
yeah.
do you see happening, or what happened there in your opinion?
Sure. So when I talk about the difference between installed sales and a turnkey framing contractor, that's very much the difference between what I think happened with Katera and the success you're seeing Integra have right now. Is all respect to Katera, and I get their vision, and I think it's great. But they tried to buy that expertise. They didn't try to serve that expertise. I don't think the philosophy was focused on what happens in the end on the site, and at its core, the craftsmanship of our trade and that expertise and that knowledge, it needs to be served and it needs to be respected, right? And you're taking how many different trades and trying trying to shove it into one company, right? How do you keep that essence? How do you do that right? So I think that's what was lost there. I think that's the piece that was missing.
Maybe they'll just be the Napster of the turnkey framing movement.
They're at MySpace. Can I add a little perspective to that too? Because I think Chris hit on a couple of really important points that I just want to drive home real quick. That I know, at least on the SBCA side of things, we've been talking about for a long time. Which is, I mean, again, SBCA, we represent sort of the traditional offsite construction. Roof trusses, wall panels, floor trusses, manufactured offsite, delivered to the job site and put together. The piece that's been missing, and Chris gets to this, is that everything is siloed, right? So you have these areas of expertise that don't hand their expertise off very well to the next party in the supply chain. And there is virtually no feedback loop back up the supply chain. And so the framer ends up getting dumped on every single time, right? They get stuff that just doesn't fit together. It's, there's something missing, or the design itself doesn't fit together and you don't realize that till you're on the job site. I mean, Chris could go on for days about all of the things that he had to deal with at the end that were the result of this siloed approach, that things just didn't get addressed and that expertise didn't flow in between the different groups. And that's ultimately what Chris is getting after. I mean, with the turnkey framing, we talk about integration, but it's really consolidation, and it's a free flow of expertise between the different divisions of labor. So in Chris's case,
flow of information.
It's all about your web of feedback, right? That Paul was talking about earlier. But I mean, Chris, I was going to end with this because I was going to ask you a question, which is, I mean, Chris, can you talk a little bit about, you mentioned that you have a component manufacturer partner. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I think that's part of it too, is that, Chris is very successful because he knows framing, but he's also successful as a turnkey framer because he's found a component manufacturer that not only knows what they're doing, but knows the benefit of coordinating and collaborating and communicating up front with Chris, because he knows Chris has an area of expertise that he doesn't have. And if they work together, their end product and what they offer to the builder contractor is going to be a much better product, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to add one quick thing there about, sort of the information as a framer. One thing, I love my industry. I want to do everything I can to promote my industry. To be a good framing contractor is different than what it means to be a good plumber, a good electrician, a good roofer. A good framing contractor, successful framing contractor, has to understand something about every other trade. You have to know what's the plumber need, what's HVAC need. You have to understand the whole of the construction process, which again sort of really lends itself to our involvement very early on. So I just wanted to sort of follow up with that. And remind me again, sir, Sean, what were you angling at with your question?
What was I angling? No, just that
the partnership.
It's not just about your expertise. It's that you have found someone who also has the expertise that you needed, right? And you're able to work together. And that's, getting back to, the difference between Integra and Conterra, and really, you talk about any of the component manufacturers, and whether it's in multifamily or it's in single family, it's all about, are the players in the supply chain talking to one another, and are they sharing their expertise?
Are they willing to open up and learn from each other? If I understand your process, then we can talk about what I need, and we can see how that works into your process best.
And you know what? It's such a great conversation about knowing each other. And you're talking the supply chain, and if we could twist it a little bit towards lumber, we are in unprecedented times, and this volatility is off the charts, and it's just not fair. It's not fair that the mills didn't get the data to ramp their production properly. It's not fair that the contractors don't get the pricing information in timely orders that they can quote properly. And you look at our dysfunctional supply chain, we're just not passing that information because somewhere along the way, someone felt that it was in their best interest to hold tight and hide the information. When I started this conversation, our number one goal is to build affordable housing units. So I think as a community, we need to embrace exactly what Chris has done for turnkey framing. And we can take it one step further into the distribution of the material. And let's be transparent and do what people are experts at. Distributors who can distribute efficiently, provide value.
You're absolutely right, Mike. Paul early on the call talked about how there's still value adds to be had in the distribution chain, mixed loads, lines of credit, this, that, and the other. And I've been buying on Materials Exchange. I've got a lot of benefit out of that. But if you want to talk about the free flow of information and understanding other people's processes, right? I buy from you guys. I buy from brokers who are doing mixed loads for me out of reloads. Here's what's changed with my conversation with my brokers since I've sort of been able to see what's happening in real time and what buyers can actually buy at. I'm always thinking about my operation. I'm always thinking about my needs. I've got my dry erase board with my plan, right? Figure out what your plan is and work that. Don't try to buy the bottom of the market. I always know what those needs are. My salesman isn't always cognizant of that. He's got a good idea of it, but being able to see what's happening with lumber and where prices are at, I can see all the angles and I can more see things the way that my broker is going to be seeing things and looking at the market, right? So I'm seeing something that I need just is trading at 100 less today than it was last week. I'm going to work that in, and that's going to help me understand what my broker's thinking. And I'm going to call him up and I'm going to pitch something to him that he would not be calling me about, and I absolutely would not be cognizant of if I didn't know what was happening in real time. So that's a huge value add for me.
I wonder if I can jump in there just for a second, because we have a question on the board from Matt Lehman, and I'm gonna frame it a little bit. You're talking about you as a business owner are looking at real-time market pricing that's out there. Do you have anybody else either on your staff, or are you aware of other people that have lumber buyers that are either job specific? We do know, I do have customers on the exchange who have put their salespeople as logins, and their salespeople can actually see market pricing, and they take that into their thinking in terms of trends and replacement costs and whatnot. But who does the buying? Is there anything that's job specific? How do you want to? How can you address that for us?
For turnkey framing contractors, generally we're generally, and this is very this is not all encompassing, but generally we're looking at jobs in terms of our needs, and we're buying according to those jobs. There are guys who try to buy when they can find a good deal, and a lot of turnkey guys do have dedicated buyers, even buying departments. But we're generally looking at a job by job basis. Now you've got turnkey framers who have owned the entire process, and so they're going to hold more inventory because they're building trusses, they're building components, and they're needing to keep those guys busy, right? And so they're constantly feeding, and they need to have an inventory. But generally speaking, we're looking at things by the job.
It's a different buying habit than the traditional component manufacturer, right? Who's like, our process is we're trying to hold a certain number of SKUs of lumber, and then we're designing to those SKUs. And we're covering those SKUs because we know our production limitations. We can only go so wide, so high, whatever it is. We know what plate sizes. We're trying to keep those SKUs low. So they're working within a box and designing to that box, where, Chris, you're in a slightly different boat, right?
Yep, absolutely. And in that also, you've got while we're looking at the jobs, we're there. You've got the entire spectrum of guys who are willing to take on more or less risk. There are guys, there are framers who are happy to lock in a deal with a GC and are going to bet the market's going to come down and they're going to pick up a few bucks. And then you've got guys like, I always use Pedro up in New York as an example, or last year's president. He sells a job, he buys the lumber the next day. That's it. You know, no risk. But yeah.
So we're almost, we're basically running out of time. I end the conversation. By the way, phenomenal conversation. Chris, thank you for being so transparent.
Absolutely.
So I always end the conversation with a question, and the question is, what do you see that nobody else sees? So what do you see going forward? You know, the whole idea of this call is to say, here's what's going on, but this is the vision moving forward. So I'll ask the same thing of you, Sean, but Chris, you know, what do you see happening in the next 6 months, 12 months, a year that kind of no one else is seeing out there?
Oh boy. Crystal ball. What I would like to see is what I've been saying the entire call, is that at its core, all the vertical integration and all the innovative ideas have to be focused on serving the guys on site that have the skill set, that are the craftsmen, that understand what needs to happen for things to go well and smooth. I don't think that's been given the respect that it needs for offsite to be successful. And there are a lot of examples, if you look for them, of people who have served that side of things and have been very successful with it.
So I'm going to just piggyback what you said. Something I see in 5 years, I don't think we're going to have 2x4s anymore or 2x6s. I think that your group with that expertise is going to redefine and re-standardize the product you need to build the building. And through platforms like Materials Exchange, that feedback loop is going to go back to the producers, and you're going to tell them, I want 25 millimeters by 68 millimeters for this specific use. So,
you know, Mike, that reminds me of a conversation that our industry was having with the lumber industry back when the Southern Pine design value change was happening. And we brought a bunch of lumber producers together from the South with component manufacturers. And there was a lot of discussion because component manufacturers they're not buying fiber, they're buying design values. Because they're designing to them in their software, they need the design values. They don't care what that lumber looks like. They don't care, they don't really care the dimension either, frankly. They care about what's its strength properties because they need that structure to stand up. So there were a lot of discussions around that. And at the end, the circular discussion was the component manufacturers are like, what design values can you guarantee me? And the mills were like, we can give you anything you want. What do you want? And the question just kept on revolving. So that Mike, you touch on the same thing. I wouldn't be surprised if at some point there's a similar discussion between the lumber supplier and the framer. What do you want? What can you give me? You know, how flexible can you be? How many different SKUs can I carry? That would be an interesting thing to see happen.
and when this communication and this data flow starts working, we can, just like Chris is saying, the expertise of putting the building up, there's that expertise of taking a round log and turning it into a piece of wood. So if we allow the sawmill to do what they're great at, and they produce a product that you can use and be great at, it's win-win for everyone. All right, Sean, what's your vision?
Yeah, crystal ball. You know, I think that the market over the last 6 months to like 2 years has really drawn focus on the importance of fiber. And, you know, for many decades, our industry has really focused on cycle times, reducing job site labor, and we throw away the material waste comment. We really been focused on, you can do more capacity, framer, contractor, whoever, you can do it better, you can do it more efficiently. I think there's going to be a lot more focus on material efficiency going into buildings. I think there's going to be a lot of focus on, I'll just pick on wall panels. Forever, wall panel manufacturing, offsite wall panel manufacturer has been focused on, let's just shift the labor burden from the job site to a manufacturing facility, and let's replicate exactly what's happening in the field, but we'll just do it in a more controlled space, which is great. And there are certainly lots of component manufacturers have figured out many different ways to reap value out of a wall panel, adding a wall panel line to their product mix. But I think the next step here is, how do we take even more material out of the roof trusses? How do we take a lot of material out of the wall panels and still make that work efficiently? How do we design floors more efficiently? That's not necessarily great news for lumber producers, but at the same time, really all that means is the same amount of fiber is going to get consumed. You're just going to be able to produce more units and meet the demand that's growing every month.
Jump in really quick.
Yep.
And you've seen a few examples of framers owning the engineering side of things from the beginning in multifamily, where they bring in the engineer of record, right? And the reason they're doing that is they want standard details that their crew can learn and repeat over and over again. So really, that's the holy grail for us, right?
Well, and the last thing I'll add to that, Chris, because the framer at the end is the linchpin in that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Chris, just think about, you were talking about your dumpsters of material that you take back to the shop. That's a microcosm. You're very efficient compared to most of the stick framers that exist across the country. Just the amount of fiber that gets thrown into a landfill right now, that's going to come into hyper focus here shortly. And that's another thing that the component manufacturing side of things kind of represents, right? And the turnkey framer represents is, I'm going to waste less material. I can provide you a real savings because I'm using a lot less material overall. I'm not throwing it away. I'm using it all. And that's going to have a real effect.
Yeah. Sean, you're spot on. And I'll finish with a little analogy. My dad is an 83-year-old carpenter, and it doesn't matter if he needs 8-footers or 2-foot stakes. The only thing he can use is a 2x4 16-foot to start to do that project. And it cracks me up where you take someone, he didn't even know 2x3s existed. And I'm like, well, yeah, they cost a quarter of what a 2x4, or 3/4 of what a 2x4 is going to cost. So there's a different thought process, and it's going to be amazing, the buildings that we build in 5 years. That stupid concrete building that fell down in Florida, if that was made out of wood, it would not have fallen down.
All right. Well, I'm going to segue to the end of the show. If you're a student of the industry, which I think we all are, that's why we're here. I love Friday mornings because you have these kinds of conversations. Mike, when you were talking about, I kind of want to put a marker out for 5 years from now and see if there are any more 4x8s being manufactured anymore. I think that's a bold statement, but that's why you're our leader. And so it'll be interesting to see what comes out of the Play-Doh machine that we call lumber manufacturing and lumber mills, if standardized sizes on the exchange are going to be 8x12 foot walls, if those are going to be the kinds of units of measure that are being traded or moved around on the exchange. It's just throwing it out there.
Yep.
So anyway,
next week, the second segment is going to be amazing. John Mattingly of Mattingly Lumber, who is a lumber yard component manufacturer and framer. He has crews. So if you want to hear about the vertical integration, next week is the call to be on. And John is not afraid to throw his opinion out there. So we're going to have some fun next week.
well, cool. Well, thank you for that. And thank you all for your attendance. Sean and Chris, thank you so much for your time this morning. And Sean, we will see you next week as well for part 2. And everybody have a wonderful weekend. And thanks for coming. Take care.
Cheers, Chris.
Thank you, guys. Cheers.
Thank you.